The stars looked different when 800 alien warships dropped out of hyperspace. Admiral Thexmore stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display show green dots representing his massive fleet. Each dot was a warship, filled with soldiers ready to fight. Each ship had weapons that could destroy cities. Together, they made up the third fleet of the Vectari Empire, and they had come to take the human colony world called New Sol. Thexmore was tall, even for a Vectari, with blue-gray skin and forearms that moved with practiced grace. His uniform was covered in medals from 20 different battles. He had never lost a fight. Today would not be the first time. "Status report," he ordered, his voice carrying easily across the busy bridge. His second-in-command, Commander Veltar, checked his console. "All ships report ready, Admiral. We count 812 vessels in formation. The humans have detected our arrival." Thexmore smiled, showing sharp teeth. The humans had detected them because he wanted them to. Fear was a useful weapon, and he wanted the humans to see exactly how hopeless their situation was. On the planet below, 12 million humans lived in cities and farms. They had built a nice little world for themselves, with green parks and clean rivers. Soon it would belong to the Vectari Empire. The humans would work in the mines and factories just like all the other conquered species. "What defenses do they have?" Thexmore asked. "Very little, sir," Veltar replied. 3 orbital defense platforms, maybe 20 patrol ships, a few missile batteries on the surface. Our intelligence says their technology is at least 50 years behind ours." Thexmore nodded. The Vectari had studied human military records for years. Humans used simple kinetic weapons, metal bullets and explosive missiles. Their energy shields were basic. Their ships were slow and clumsy. It would be like fighting children with toys. Down on New Sol, Governor Park Sunmi stood in the colony's command center, watching the same tactical display but from a very different perspective. Where Thexmore saw easy prey, she saw her people about to die. "How long until they reach us?" she asked. Commander Li Wu-jin, head of orbital defense, checked his instruments. "At their current speed, 6 hours. Maybe less if they decide to push their engines." Park closed her eyes for a moment. She had been governor for 8 years, and they had been good years. The colony was prosperous. Crime was low. People were happy. Now she would have to watch it all burn. "Send out the evacuation." "Orders," she said quietly. "All non-essential personnel to the underground shelters. Medical teams to emergency stations, and get me Captain Yoon on the comm." Captain Yoon Dae-ho commanded the patrol vessel Defender, one of the few military ships in the system. It was a small ship with a crew of 30, designed to chase smugglers and pirates, not fight a full fleet, but it was all they had. "Governor?" Yoon's voice crackled over the comm. "My ship is ready. We'll do what we can." Park wanted to tell him to run, to take his crew and escape while they still could. But she knew he would not listen. Yoon was a good man, and good men did not abandon their homes. "Thank you, Captain," she said instead. Back on the Vectari flagship, Thexmore was reviewing the battle plan. It was simple because it did not need to be complex. The human defenses would last, maybe an hour. The orbital platforms would die first, destroyed by long-range missiles. Then the patrol ships would be hunted down and killed. After that, his ground troops would land and take control of the major cities. Admiral, his communications officer, called out, "We're receiving a transmission from the planet. They want to surrender." Thexmore felt a moment of disappointment. He had hoped for at least a small fight. "Put it through." Governor Park's face appeared on the main screen. She looked tired and afraid, but her voice was steady. "Admiral Thexmore, of the Vectari Empire. I am Governor Park Sunmi of New Sol Colony. We are prepared to discuss terms of surrender to avoid unnecessary bloodshed." "There are no terms," Thexmore replied. "You will surrender unconditionally. Your military forces will stand down. Your people will submit to Vectari authority. Any resistance will be met with overwhelming force." Park was quiet for a long moment. "And if we refuse?" Thexmore gestured to his tactical display, where 800 green dots waited like hungry predators. Look at your sensors, Governor. You have 20 patrol ships. I have 800 warships. Your people will die for nothing. I understand, Park said finally. Give me 1 hour to prepare the surrender documents. You have 30 minutes, Thexmore said, and cut the transmission. He turned to his crew, feeling satisfied. Sometimes the reputation of the Vectari Empire was enough to win battles without firing a shot. It saved time and ammunition, but Commander Veltar was frowning at his sensor display. Admiral, I'm picking up something strange. What kind of strange? There's a ship at the edge of the system. It just appeared on sensors. It's moving toward us. Thexmore looked at the tactical display. There was indeed a new contact, a single red dot moving slowly in their direction. Identification? It's transmitting human codes. Registry shows it as the UEDF Indomitable. Classification appears to be a single battlecruiser. The bridge fell quiet. Then someone started laughing. Soon half the crew was chuckling at the absurdity of it. One ship, Thexmore said, shaking his head. They're sending one ship against my entire fleet. Should we destroy it, Admiral? Thexmore considered this. The ship was still far away, at least an hour out at its current speed. It would be easy enough to swat it like an insect. But there was something amusing about the gesture. The humans knew they could not win, but they were sending one lone ship anyway. It showed spirit even if it was foolish. Let it come, he decided. When it gets close enough, we'll give it a chance to surrender. If it refuses, we'll make an example of it for the people on the planet. Sometimes a demonstration is worth more than a quick victory. The Indomitable continued its approach, a tiny speck of defiance against an ocean of enemies. On the planet below, long-range sensors had detected it too. In the command center, Commander Lee watched the lone ship with growing dread. That's suicide, he whispered. Governor Park looked at the display with tears in her eyes. Someone up there was willing to die for New Sol. Some brave crew had decided that even a hopeless fight was better than no fight at all. She opened a channel to the approaching ship. UEDF Indomitable, this is Governor Park. Please respond. The reply came immediately, calm and professional. Governor Park, this is Captain Kim Min-ho of the Indomitable. We received your distress signal and are responding. Captain, there are 800 enemy ships out there. You need to turn around and run while you still can. There was a pause. Then Captain Kim's voice came back, still calm, almost amused. Governor, with respect, running is not really our style. Park wanted to argue, to order him to retreat, to save his crew from pointless death. But she found she could not speak. There was something in the captain's voice, a quiet confidence that made no sense given the situation. On his flagship, Admiral Thexmore watched the human ship approach and felt a growing sense of anticipation. Soon he would add another victory to his long list of conquered worlds. The humans would learn what happened to those who defied the Vectari Empire. He had no way of knowing that everything he believed about humans was wrong. He had no way of knowing that the approaching ship represented something far more dangerous than he could imagine. He had no way of knowing that in the next few hours, his understanding of warfare, technology, and the universe itself would be completely destroyed. The Indomitable continued its steady approach, and the galaxy held its breath. Captain Kim Min-ho stood quietly on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the massive alien fleet grow larger on his screens. Around him, his crew worked with calm efficiency. No one seemed worried about the impossible odds they faced. Lieutenant, Commander Choi Hana checked her weapon systems. Chief Engineer Bae Tae-sung monitored the ship's power levels. Communications Officer Shin Yu-na listened to the chatter from both the alien fleet and the colony below. Kim was a veteran of the Centauri War, where humans had first encountered truly hostile aliens. He had learned important lessons in that conflict. The most important lesson was this: when someone threatens innocent people, you stop them. It did not matter how big they were or how many ships they had. You found a way to stop them. Distance to enemy fleet? Kim asked. 45 minutes at current speed, Captain, Choi replied. They're holding formation, probably waiting to see what we do. What's our status, Tae-sung? The chief engineer smiled. All systems green, Captain. The modifications we installed last month are working perfectly. The ship is ready for whatever you need her to do. Kim nodded. The Indomitable was not like other human ships. It was part of a special program, a test of new technologies that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Most of the crew had volunteered to be part of the experiment. They knew the risks. Yuna, open a channel to the lead alien ship. Channel open, Captain. Kim's voice carried clearly across space to the Vectari flagship. Admiral Thexmore, this is Captain Kim Min-ho of the United Earth Defense Forces. You have entered human space without permission and are threatening a civilian population. I am ordering you to withdraw immediately. On the alien flagship, the bridge crew burst into laughter again. Admiral Thexmore wiped tears from his eyes. Captain Kim, I have 800 warships. You have one. Are you seriously demanding that I retreat? Yes, Kim replied simply. The laughter stopped. There was something in that single word, a complete lack of doubt or fear that made the aliens uncomfortable. Captain, Thexmore said slowly, I do not think you understand your situation. You are outnumbered 800 to 1. Your ship will be destroyed in seconds if you continue this course. Admiral, Kim said, and his voice was patient, like a teacher explaining something to a student. I do not think you understand your situation. You are threatening human civilians. That means you have already lost. The only question now is how many of your people will die before you accept that fact. Thexmore felt his temper rising. You are either insane or stupid, human. No single ship can stand against my fleet. We will see, Kim said calmly. You have 10 minutes to begin withdrawal. After that, I will assume hostile intent and respond accordingly. The channel closed. On the Vectari flagship, the bridge was silent. Everyone was looking at Admiral Thexmore, waiting for orders. Sensor. Analysis, Thexmore snapped. What exactly are we dealing with? His science officer, a nervous creature named Quindar, hunched over his instruments. The ship appears to be roughly frigate-sized, Admiral. Maybe a light cruiser. Energy signature is strange. Very low, actually. Almost like it's running on minimal power. Weapons? I cannot detect any obvious weapon ports. Their hull design is unusual. Lots of smooth curves, no sharp angles. It almost looks more like a piece of art than a warship. Thexmore studied the tactical display. The human ship was still approaching at a steady pace, not fast, not slow, just constant. There was something unsettling about that steady approach, like watching a predator stalk its prey. Could it be carrying some kind of superweapon? He asked. A planet-killer bomb or something similar? Quindar shook his head. Impossible, Admiral. The ship is too small, and we would detect that level of energy buildup. Down on New Seoul, Governor Park and her staff watched the same display with growing confusion and hope. The lone human ship continued its approach, apparently unafraid of the massive fleet waiting for it. What kind of ship is that? Commander Lee asked. Park checked the registry. UEDF Indomitable, battle cruiser class, commissioned 3 years ago. I've never heard of it. 3 years, Lee mused. That was right after the Centauri War ended. Maybe it's one of the new experimental designs. Captain Yoon's voice crackled over the comm from his patrol ship. Governor, I'm reading some very strange energy patterns from that ship. My sensors can't get a clear lock on it. What do you mean? It's like the ship is fuzzy. Sometimes my instruments say it's there, sometimes they say it's not. I've never seen anything like it. Back on the Indomitable, Captain Kim checked the countdown timer. 7 minutes until his deadline expired. He turned to his tactical officer. Hana, are we ready? Lieutenant Commander Choi nodded. All systems. Standing by, Captain. Weapons are charged and ready. Defensive systems are online. The crew is prepared. Kim looked around his bridge. His crew was small compared to most warships, only 47 people in total. But each one of them was special. They had all undergone the enhancement process, linking their minds directly to the ship's systems. In a way, they were not just crew members, they were part of the ship itself. Tae-sung, how's our power situation? The chief engineer grinned. Captain, we're barely using any power at all right now. The ship is idling, Like a sleeping cat, when you give the word, we can push her to levels that would make a normal ship explode. Good. Yuna, record a message for transmission to Earth Command. Ready, Captain? Kim spoke clearly into the recorder. Earth Command, this is Captain Kim Min-ho of the Indomitable. We have encountered a hostile alien fleet threatening New Sol Colony. 812 enemy vessels. We are engaging per standing orders to protect human civilians. We'll update when situation resolves. He paused, then added, Tell my wife I love her. The message was compressed and fired off through hyperspace. In a few hours, Earth would know what happened here, but by then the battle would be over one way or another. Admiral Thexmore watched his countdown timer reach 0. The human ship was now 30 minutes away and still approaching. He had given them a chance to surrender, and they had ignored it. Now they would face the consequences. All ships, he broadcast to his fleet, prepare for combat operations. We will make an example of this human ship. Let the people on the planet see what happens to those who defy the Vectari Empire. 800 warships began powering up their weapon systems. Plasma cannons charged, missile tubes loaded, energy shields strengthened. The space around New Sol began to glow with the accumulated power of the most advanced military technology in the galaxy. On the Indomitable, warning, alarms began to sound as sensors detected the massive energy buildup. Captain, Choi reported, they're powering weapons, all of them. Expected, Kim replied calmly. Any word from the colony? Governor Park is asking if we need assistance, Yuna said. Captain Yoon says his patrol ships are ready to support us. Kim shook his head. Tell them to stay back. This is not their fight anymore. He walked to the center of his bridge and placed his hands on a special control panel. Immediately, his consciousness expanded as he linked directly with the ship's computer systems. Through the Indomitable's sensors, he could see every enemy ship, every weapon, every possible threat. The aliens thought they knew what they were facing. They thought this was just another primitive human vessel with simple weapons and weak defenses. They were about to learn how wrong they were. All hands, Kim announced over the ship's intercom. This is the captain. We are about to engage a superior force in defense of human civilians. Remember your training. Trust your equipment. Trust each other. Show them what humans can do when we decide to stop playing nice. The Indomitable continued its steady approach toward 800 enemy ships, and Captain Kim Min-ho smiled. The aliens had made two critical mistakes. First, they had threatened innocent people. Second, they had assumed that being outnumbered meant being outgunned. They were about to discover that when it came to human military technology, numbers meant nothing at all. Admiral Thexmore watched his chronometer count down the final seconds. When it reached 0, the human ship had not changed course, had not slowed down, had not responded to his ultimatum in any way. It simply continued its steady approach like an asteroid drifting through space. Communications, Thexmore ordered. Final warning to the human vessel. His communications officer opened the channel. Human ship Indomitable, you have ignored our warnings. Surrender now or be destroyed. Captain Kim's reply came back immediately, calm as still water. Negative, you may withdraw at any time. That was enough. Thexmore had shown patience, had given them chances to surrender. Now they would learn the price of defying the Vectari Empire. Squadron Leader Veltar, he called to his second-in-command. Take your destroyers and eliminate that ship. Make it quick, but make sure the colony sees it clearly. Veltar saluted with all four arms. It will be done, Admiral. 12 of the Empire's finest destroyers broke formation and accelerated toward the lone human ship. Each destroyer was twice the size of the Indomitable and carried enough firepower to level a city. Together, they represented more military might than most species possessed in their entire fleet. On the destroyer Vengeance, Squadron Leader Veltar studied the tactical display. The human ship was still 20 minutes away at its current speed, but his destroyers were much faster. They would intercept it in 8 minutes and finish the fight in less than 1. All ships, he broadcast to his squadron, maintain formation. When we reach optimal range, Concentrate all fire on the human vessel. I want nothing left but debris. His weapon officers confirmed readiness. Plasma cannons were charged and locked onto the target. The human ship was not even trying to evade or change course. It was either the bravest thing Veltar had ever seen, or the most foolish. On New Sol, millions of people watched their screens in terror and fascination. The 12 alien destroyers were clearly visible as bright dots racing toward the single human ship. In the colony command center, Governor Park gripped the edge of her console until her knuckles turned white. "Can we help them somehow?" she asked desperately. Commander Lee shook his head. "Our orbital platforms don't have the range. The patrol ships are too far away. There's nothing we can do but watch." Captain Yoon's voice crackled over the comm from his patrol ship. "Governor, I'm picking up some kind of energy buildup from the Indomitable. Something is happening." On the human warship, Captain Kim felt the ship responding to his mental commands. Through his neural link, he could sense every system coming online. The Indomitable was waking up, like a sleeping giant opening its eyes. "Hana," he said quietly. "Prepare for engagement." Lieutenant Commander Choi's hands moved over her control panel with practiced precision. "All weapon systems online, Captain. Defensive grid activated. We are ready." Chief Engineer Bay monitored the power levels as they began to climb. "Captain, the fusion reactors are responding beautifully. We're approaching full power." The space around the Indomitable began to shimmer slightly, as if the ship was surrounded by invisible heat waves. On the approaching destroyers, sensor officers noticed the strange readings but could not make sense of them. 7 minutes to intercept, Veltar announced to his squadron. "Prepare for engagement." But something was wrong. The human ship was accelerating, and it was accelerating far faster than any ship that size should be able to move. Within seconds, it was traveling at speeds that should have torn its hull apart. "Impossible," whispered Veltar's sensor officer. "No ship can accelerate that fast without inertial compensation systems we can detect." "It does not matter," Veltar replied, but he sounded less certain than before. "We still outnumber them 12-1. The distance between the two forces closed rapidly. When they reached what the Vectari considered optimal firing range, Veltar gave the order. "All ships open fire." 12 destroyers unleashed their full firepower at once. Plasma bolts that could melt through 20 meters of hardened steel streaked across space toward the human ship. Each bolt contained enough energy to destroy a building. Together, they represented enough destructive force to glass a continent. The weapons reached their target and simply vanished, not deflected, not absorbed, not scattered. They just ceased to exist as if they had never been fired at all. On the bridge of the Vengeance, every alarm began screaming at once. Sensor officers stared at their instruments in disbelief. Weapon officers checked and rechecked their systems, unable to understand what had just happened. "Report," Veltar shouted over the noise. "Sir," his tactical officer stammered, "our weapons, they just disappeared. There's no impact, no explosion, no energy signature. It's like they never existed." "Fire again." The second volley produced the same impossible result. Hundreds of plasma bolts simply vanished the moment they came within a certain distance of the human ship. The Indomitable continued its approach, apparently undamaged and completely unconcerned. Then it fired back. The human ship's weapons did not look impressive. They appeared to be simple kinetic projectiles, basic metal slugs fired at high velocity. Any competent shield system should have stopped them easily. The destroyer's shields were far better than competent. The first projectile hit the destroyer Fury amidships. The ship's shields, which could deflect antimatter explosions, simply collapsed like soap bubbles. The projectile continued through the hull as if the armored metal was made of paper. It passed completely through the ship, leaving a perfectly circular hole 3 meters wide. But that was not the strangest part. The strangest part was that the hole went through everything in its path. Bulkheads, equipment, crew members. Everything in the projectile's path was simply gone, removed from existence with surgical precision. The second shot hit the destroyer Wrath. Then the third hit Malice. Each shot was perfectly aimed. Each shot penetrated multiple ships, and each shot left the same impossible wounds. "Evasive maneuvers," Veltar screamed into his communicator. The destroyers began desperate evasion patterns, twisting and diving through space like fish fleeing a shark. But the human ship's targeting was perfect. Every shot hit exactly where it was aimed, regardless of how the targets moved. On the Indomitable, Captain Kim watched the enemy ships through his neural link. To his enhanced perception, the destroyers were moving in slow motion. Their attempts at evasion were clumsy and predictable. His targeting computer, linked directly to his thoughts, tracked each ship with mechanical precision. Hana, continue firing. Target their engines and weapon systems when possible. I want prisoners for interrogation. Understood, Captain, but the destroyers were not built to survive this kind of attack. As the impossible weapons continued to find their targets, ship after ship began to break apart. Internal explosions tore through hulls already weakened by wounds that should not exist. Atmosphere vented into space. Emergency beacons began transmitting distress calls. Within 5 minutes, 8 of the 12 destroyers were either destroyed or crippled beyond repair. The remaining 4 were trying desperately to retreat, their crews broadcasting surrender signals on every frequency. The Indomitable let them go. On the Vectory flagship, Admiral Thexmore stared at his tactical display in stunned silence. 12 destroyers gone. Just like that, the human ship had not even slowed down. Sensor analysis, he demanded, his voice harsh with shock and anger. Science Officer Quindar was frantically checking his instruments. Admiral, I cannot explain what we just witnessed. The human weapons appear to violate several fundamental laws of physics and their defensive systems. Our weapons did not bounce off or get absorbed. They just stopped existing. That is impossible. Yes, sir. It is impossible. But it happened. Thexmore looked at the lone human ship, which was now continuing its approach toward his main fleet. In the space behind it, the wreckage of his destroyers drifted like a monument to his failure. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Thexmore felt something he had never experienced before. Doubt. Everything he thought he knew, about warfare, about technology, about the natural order of the universe, had just been proven wrong. The human ship transmitted another message. Admiral Thexmore, came Captain Kim's calm voice. You have seen what we are capable of. This is your final warning. Withdraw your fleet immediately, or I will consider you a threat to human civilians and respond accordingly. Thexmore wanted to refuse. Every instinct told him to unleash his full fleet, to crush this arrogant human with overwhelming force. But the wreckage of his destroyers floated in space as a reminder that overwhelming force meant nothing against weapons that ignored the laws of physics. What are you? He whispered. Captain Kim's reply was almost gentle. We are humans, Admiral, and you are threatening our people. That means you have made a very serious mistake. The Indomitable continued its approach, and 800 Vectari warships waited to learn what would happen next. Admiral Thexmore stared at the wreckage of his destroyers floating in the darkness of space. 12 ships, 12 crews, gone in minutes. The human vessel continued its steady approach, showing no signs of damage or strain from the battle. His bridge crew waited in tense silence. Some looked at their instruments, trying to make sense of what they had witnessed. Others watched their admiral, waiting for orders that would either save them or damn them all. Sir, Commander Veltar said quietly, perhaps we should consider the humans' offer. A strategic withdrawal might be. No. Thexmore slammed his fist down on his console. I will not be humiliated by a single ship. I will not retreat from primitives who got lucky. But even as he said it, doubt gnawed at his confidence. What he had just witnessed was not luck. Those weapons had defied everything the Vectari knew about physics and engineering. The defensive systems that made their plasma weapons simply cease to exist were beyond anything in their technological understanding. Battle Group Commander Nexivol, he called across the bridge communications. Yes, Admiral? Prepare your battle group for full assault, 200 ships. I want that human vessel overwhelmed and destroyed. There was a pause. Admiral, with respect, we just saw what happened to Squadron Leader Veltar's destroyers. Perhaps we should analyze the threat before. The threat, Thexmore interrupted. Is one ship against our entire fleet? Even if they have some new weapon, technology, they cannot possibly fight 200 ships at once. Mass their attack, overwhelm their defenses, destroy them. On the human ship, Captain Kim felt the massive energy buildup as 200 alien warships prepared for battle. Through his neural link with the Indomitable's sensors, he could see every enemy vessel, every weapon system, every crew member preparing for what they thought would be an overwhelming assault. Captain, Lieutenant Commander Choi reported, the aliens are massing 200 ships for attack. Energy signatures indicate they're bringing everything they have. Antimatter torpedoes, quantum disruptors, gravity weapons. Understood, Kim replied calmly. Taesung, how are our systems? Chief Engineer Bay checked his readings. Captain, we're operating at about 15% of maximum capability. The ship can handle much more if needed. Kim nodded. The aliens. We're about to learn the difference between human engineering and everyone else's. While other species built their technology to work within the laws of physics, humans had taken a different approach. They had decided that if the laws of physics were inconvenient, they would simply build machines that disagreed with them politely but firmly. Yuna, open a channel to the colony. Channel open, Captain. Governor Park, this is Captain Kim. You may want to move your people away from any windows for the next few minutes. Things are about to get bright out here. Down on New Seoul, Governor Park stared at her tactical display in horror. 200 alien warships were moving into attack formation. Even with the impossible victory they had just witnessed, she could not believe that one ship could survive that kind of assault. All personnel to blast shelters, she ordered. Emergency protocols now in effect. Captain Yoon's voice crackled over the communications. Governor, my patrol ships are requesting permission to assist the Indomitable. Denied. Park replied firmly. Stay clear of the battle zone. That's an order. She did not want to watch more. Brave people die in a hopeless fight. The Vectari battle group completed their attack formation. 200 warships arranged in a perfect sphere, with the lone human vessel at the center. Each ship carried weapons that could destroy planets. Together they possessed enough firepower to sterilize entire solar systems. Battle Group Commander Nexaval surveyed his forces with satisfaction. No single ship could survive this kind of coordinated assault. The humans had shown impressive technology, but there were limits to what any vessel could withstand. All ships, he broadcast, lock. Weapons on target. Prepare for simultaneous fire on my mark. 200 warships aimed their most powerful weapons at the Indomitable. The space around New Seoul began to glow with accumulated energy as antimatter warheads armed themselves and quantum disruptors reached full charge. Fire. The combined firepower of 200 advanced warships erupted toward the human ship. Antimatter torpedoes that could crack moons. Energy beams that could slice through asteroids. Gravity weapons that could crush matter at the molecular level. It was the most devastating barrage in the history of Vectari warfare. The weapons reached the Indomitable and something impossible happened. The ship was suddenly in 12 different places at once. Not holographic images, not decoys. 12 actual, solid versions of the same ship, each one exactly where it needed to be to avoid the incoming fire. The weapons meant to overwhelm a single target instead found themselves scattered across empty space, hitting nothing but vacuum. Then all 12 ships became one again, occupying a position none of them had been in a moment before. On the bridge of his flagship, Battle Group Commander Nexaval stared at his sensors in complete bewilderment. What just happened? His science officer was frantically checking and rechecking his instruments. Sir, the human ship appears to have been in multiple positions simultaneously, but that's impossible. Matter cannot exist in multiple states like that. Obviously it can, Nexaval snapped. They just did it. The Indomitable began its counterattack, and the Vectari learned that their first encounter with human weapons had been gentle by comparison. The human ship fired what appeared to be simple projectiles, but these projectiles moved in ways that hurt to watch. They curved through space along paths that should not exist. They accelerated and decelerated without visible propulsion. Some of them seemed to arrive at their targets before they were fired. When the projectiles hit Vectari shields, The energy barriers did not just collapse, they inverted, turning the ship's own defensive systems into weapons that attacked from the inside. The Vektari crews began to panic as their instruments showed impossible readings. Ships that had been hit reported damage to areas that had not been struck. Crew members in sealed compartments were found with perfectly circular holes through their bodies, even though the hulls around them were intact. "Retreat!" Nexeval screamed into his communicator. "All ships, retreat!" But retreating from the human ship proved to be impossible. No matter which direction the Vektari vessels fled, the Indomitable was somehow already there waiting for them. It was as if the ship existed everywhere in the battle zone simultaneously. Captain Kim watched the alien ships through his enhanced perception. To him, their movements were predictable patterns that his computer could calculate hours in advance. The Indomitable's weapon systems, linked directly to his thoughts, fired with perfect precision at targets that were trying desperately to escape. "Hana," he said calmly. "Adjust targeting parameters. Aim for propulsion systems and weapons arrays. I want these ships disabled, not destroyed." "Understood, Captain." Switching to disable mode. But the Vektari ships were not built to survive, weapons that ignored basic physics. As the impossible projectiles continued to find their targets, ship after ship began to suffer catastrophic failures. Some simply broke apart as their internal structure was somehow removed. Others found their hulls aging decades in seconds, metal growing brittle and cracking. The most disturbing reports came from ships that had been hit by what the humans called probability shells. These weapons did not just damage their targets. They made it so the targets had never been built correctly in the first place. Ships would suddenly develop structural flaws that had existed since construction, but had somehow never been noticed until that exact moment. Within 20 minutes, more than half the battle group was either destroyed or completely disabled. The Yao, surviving ships were broadcasting surrender signals on every frequency, begging for mercy from an enemy they could not understand. The Indomitable stopped firing. "This is Captain Kim," came the human's calm voice across all communication channels. "Attention, Vektari fleet. You have now seen a demonstration of human defensive capabilities. I strongly suggest you reconsider your current course of action." On the main Vektari flagship, Admiral Thexmore stared at the tactical display showing the wreckage of his battle group. 200 ships. The pride of the Empire's military. Reduced to debris and surrendering hulks by a single human vessel. "Admiral," his communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving emergency transmissions from the disabled ships. They're requesting medical assistance." Thexmore nodded absently. "Send rescue ships." But his mind was elsewhere. Everything he had believed about warfare, about technology, about the natural order of the universe itself, had been proven wrong in less than an hour. The humans possessed weapons that violated the laws of physics, as if those laws were merely suggestions. "Sir," Science Officer Quindar reported, "I've been analyzing the battle data. The human weapons appear to operate on principles we cannot even begin to understand. They don't just use advanced technology. They seem to use technology that should not exist." Thexmore looked at the lone human ship, still maintaining its steady course toward his remaining fleet. 600 ships. Surely even the humans could not fight 600 ships at once. But as he watched the wreckage of his forces drifting in space, Admiral Thexmore began to suspect that numbers might not matter at all when facing an enemy that had apparently deck. The silence that followed the destruction of the Vektari battle group was more terrifying than any weapon. Admiral Thexmore stood on his bridge, surrounded by the most advanced military technology in the known galaxy, and felt completely helpless. The tactical display showed the wreckage of more than 300 ships, all destroyed or disabled by a single human vessel. His remaining fleet was in chaos. Ship commanders were requesting orders, demanding explanations, some even suggesting immediate retreat. But Thexmore found himself unable to speak. How could he give orders when everything he understood about warfare had been proven wrong? "Admiral," his communications officer said quietly, "the human ship is transmitting on all frequencies. They want to speak with you." Thexmore straightened his uniform and tried to compose himself. "Put it through," Captain Kim's face appeared on the main screen. He looked calm, almost friendly, like someone having a casual conversation rather than a military commander who had just destroyed hundreds of ships. "Admiral Thexmore," Kim said politely, "I hope you are beginning to understand the situation. You came here to conquer human civilians. That was a mistake." "What are you?" Thexmore whispered. Kim smiled. "That's an excellent question, Admiral. And I think it's time you got an honest answer." The human captain leaned back in his chair. "You see, Admiral, your species, like most species in the galaxy, developed technology by studying the universe and learning to work within its rules. You discovered the laws of physics and built your machines to obey them. That's a very logical approach." On New Sol, Governor Park and her staff listened in fascination to the human captain's words. Around the colony, millions of people had stopped what they were doing to watch this unprecedented conversation. "Humans," Kim continued, "took a different approach. We looked at the laws of physics and decided they were more like suggestions, guidelines, things that applied to everyone else but not necessarily to us." Captain Yoon's voice crackled over the comm from his patrol ship. "Governor, are you hearing this?" Park nodded, though he could not see her. "Every word, Captain. Every impossible word." On the Vectari flagship, Science Officer Quindar was frantically taking notes. "Captain Kim, what you're describing is impossible. The laws of physics are universal constants. They cannot be ignored or bypassed." Kim's smile grew wider. "Officer Quindar, that's exactly what makes you different from us. You believe the laws of physics cannot be bypassed. We believe they can be politely disagreed with." He gestured to someone off-screen. "Let me introduce you to my chief engineer. Tae-sung, would you explain our power systems to our guests?" Chief Engineer Bae appeared on the screen, looking cheerful and relaxed. "Hello, Admiral. The Indomitable runs on what we call a disagreement engine. Most ships use fusion or antimatter, which work by following the rules about how matter and energy behave. Our engines work by politely suggesting to the universe that we need more power than physics says we should be able to generate." "That's impossible," Quindar protested. "You keep using that word," Bae replied. "I don't think it means what you think it means. You see, impossibility is really just a failure of imagination. Humans have very good imaginations." Lieutenant Commander Choi appeared next. "Our weapons work on the same principle. Your species builds weapons that destroy targets by applying force in ways that physics allows. Our weapons destroy targets by convincing reality that the targets were never properly constructed in the first place." Admiral Thexmore felt his worldview crumbling. "You're saying you've learned to violate the fundamental laws of the universe?" "Not violate," Captain Kim corrected gently. "We've learned to negotiate with them. The universe is much more flexible than most species realize. You just have to know how to ask nicely." Communications Officer Shin Yuna joined the conversation. "The most important thing to understand, Admiral, is that this is not just advanced technology. This is an entirely different philosophy of existence. While you learn to work within the rules, we learn to question whether the rules applied to us at all." On New Sol, Dr. Sarah Velthani, a Vectari xenobiologist who had been studying human culture, watched the transmission with growing understanding. She had spent years trying to understand why humans behaved so irrationally, why they refused to accept limitations that other species took for granted. Now she finally understood. It was not irrational behavior. It was a fundamental difference in how humans viewed reality itself. "Governor," she said to Park, "I think I need to send a message to my government. This changes everything we thought we knew about your species." Back on the human ship, Captain Kim continued his explanation. "The crew of the Indomitable represents the next step in human evolution. We have undergone neural enhancement that allows us to interface directly with our ship's systems. But more than that, we have learned to think in ways that reality finds persuasive." He stood up and walked to a window. "When I give this ship an order, I'm not just operating a machine. I'm having a conversation with the universe itself. And the universe, it turns out, is much more willing to listen than anyone expected." Admiral Thexmore stared at the human captain. How many ships like yours do you have? That's classified information, Admiral. But I will tell you this, the Indomitable is not unique. Humanity has been developing this technology for 3 years, ever since the Centauri War taught us that the galaxy is not always a friendly place. The implications hit Thexmore like a physical blow. If humans had more ships like this one, if they had entire fleets that could ignore the laws of physics, you're saying, he said slowly, that your entire species has decided that reality is optional? Kim laughed. Not optional, Admiral. Negotiable. There's a difference. He returned to his captain's chair. Let me give you some advice, Admiral. Throughout history, there have been moments when one civilization encounters another that operates on completely different principles. Usually, the more flexible civilization survives. Chief Engineer Bay reappeared on screen. The thing is, Admiral, we don't want to hurt anyone. Humans prefer to solve problems peacefully. But when someone threatens innocent people, he shrugged. Well, we become very creative problem solvers. And you consider our presence here a threat to innocent people, Thexmore said. 800 warships invading a civilian colony? Captain Kim raised an eyebrow. Yes, Admiral, we consider that a threat. The human captain leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen next, Admiral. You're going to order your fleet to withdraw from this system immediately. You're going to return to your government and tell them exactly what you've seen here, and you're going to make sure they understand that threatening human civilians is a very bad idea. And if I refuse? Kim's expression didn't change, but somehow the temperature on every Vectari ship seemed to drop several degrees. Admiral, I have 47 crew members on this ship. Each one of them is linked to weapons systems that can rewrite the fundamental nature of matter. I've been very gentle with your fleet so far. Please don't make me show you what happens when humans stop being polite. On his flagship, Admiral Thexmore looked at his remaining 600 ships and realized that they might as well be 600 paper airplanes for all the good they would do against this enemy. You win, he said quietly. Captain Kim smiled. Admiral, this was never about winning or losing. This was about making sure some very nice people on the planet below get to go home to their families tonight. Mission accomplished. The transmission ended, and Admiral Thexmore was left staring at a blank screen, trying to figure out how to explain to his empire that they had just encountered a species that had apparently convinced the universe to let them cheat. Admiral Thexmore's hands shook as he activated the fleet-wide communication system. Around him, his bridge crew waited in tense silence. Some stared at their instruments, still trying to make sense of the impossible readings from the human ship. Others watched their admiral, wondering if he had finally lost his mind. All ships, Thexmore announced, his voice carefully controlled. This is Admiral Thexmore. We are withdrawing from this system immediately. All vessels, begin retreat to hyperspace jump coordinates. The response was immediate chaos. Ship commanders demanded explanations. Junior officers questioned orders. Some captains flatly refused to retreat from a single enemy vessel. Admiral, came the voice of Captain Mordak from the cruiser domination. With respect, we still outnumber the humans 600 to 1. Surely we cannot retreat from a single ship. Thexmore looked at his tactical display, where the wreckage of more than 300 ships drifted in the darkness. Captain Mordak, you are welcome to stay and engage the human vessel personally. I will make sure your sacrifice is remembered. There was a long silence, then, beginning retreat, Admiral. One by one, the Vectari warships began to withdraw. Some moved quickly, eager to escape the impossible enemy. Others retreated slowly, their commanders still struggling to accept what they had witnessed. On the Indomitable, Captain Kim watched the alien fleet withdraw with satisfaction. Yuna, send a message to the colony. Tell Governor Park that the threat has been neutralized. Yes, Captain, Communications Officer Shin replied. Should I report our status to Earth Command? Kim considered this. Tell them the situation is resolved. Include the full battle recordings and sensor data. Command is going to want to study what happened here. Chief Engineer Bay looked up from his console. Captain, should I power down the disagreement engines? Not yet, Kim replied. Let's make sure our guests are actually leaving before we relax. Down on New Sol, the celebration had already begun. As word spread that the alien fleet was retreating, people poured out of shelters and emergency bunkers. In the colony command center, Governor Park watched the tactical display with tears of relief streaming down her face. "Governor," Commander Lee said quietly, "I've never seen anything like that. One ship against 800 and they just won." Park nodded, wiping her eyes. "Captain Yoon, bring your patrol ships home and send a message to Captain Kim. Tell him New Sol owes him a debt we can never repay." Captain Yoon's voice crackled, back over the comm. "Already done, Governor. Though I think the captain would say he was just doing his job." But the implications of what had happened were only beginning to sink in across the galaxy. On the retreating Vectari flagship, Science, Officer Quindar was frantically compiling his report for the Empire's military command. "Admiral," he said, "how do I explain this to High Command? How do I tell them that the humans possess technology that violates the fundamental laws of physics?" Thexmore stared out at the stars ahead. "You tell them the truth, Quindar. You tell them that we encountered a species that has apparently decided reality is negotiable, and they're winning the negotiation." The journey back to Vectari space would take several days. Several days for Thexmore to figure out how to explain to his superiors that the Third Fleet had been defeated by a single ship. Several days to write a report that would change how the Empire viewed humanity forever. But the Vectari were not the only ones watching. Throughout the galaxy, intelligence agencies and military commands received urgent reports about the Battle of New Sol. A single human warship had defeated an entire fleet using technology that should not exist. On the homeworld of the Zelkan Confederacy, military advisor Threlvin burst into the emergency council session. "Counselors, we have just received confirmation of the reports from the New Sol system. The humans, they're not what we thought they were." Council leader Vexmar looked up from her datapad. "Explain." "A single human warship defeated 800 Vectari vessels using weapons that our scientists say violate at least 12 fundamental laws of physics. They didn't just have better technology. They had technology that should not exist." The council chamber fell silent. The Zelkan had been preparing their own invasion of human space, confident that their advanced fleet could overwhelm the primitive human colonies. "Cancel the invasion plans," Vexmar ordered quietly. "Immediately." Similar scenes played out across dozens of worlds. The Krelthan Empire, which had been massing forces for a strike against Earth itself, suddenly found urgent reasons to redeploy their fleets elsewhere. The Mordanian Collective, famous for their inevitable conquest doctrine, began drafting non-aggression treaties. On Earth, the report from Captain Kim reached Earth Defense Command and immediately triggered the highest levels of security classification. Admiral Chen Wei-Ming, the Korean-Chinese commander of Earth's defense forces, read the battle report 3 times before believing it. "Get me a secure channel to the president," he ordered his aide. "And contact the Science Council. They need to see this immediately." Within hours, the most powerful leaders in human space were gathering for an emergency session. President Anderson, a tall woman with graying hair, looked around the room at the faces of generals, scientists, and politicians. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "it appears that our experimental warship program has been more successful than anyone anticipated. The question now is, what do we do with this capability?" Dr. Sarah Kim, the lead scientist on the reality manipulation project, stood up. "Madam President, I should point out that the Indomitable represents just the beginning. We have 17 more ships under construction using similar technology, and the theoretical applications." She paused. "Well, they're limitless." Admiral Chen leaned forward. "The galaxy just learned that humans don't play by the same rules as everyone else. That's going to make us either the most respected species in known space or the most feared." "Maybe both," the president replied. Back on the Indomitable, Captain Kim was writing his patrol report. It was surprisingly brief for a document that would change galactic history. Routine patrol of New Sol system interrupted by hostile Vectari fleet. 812 enemy vessels attempting invasion of human colony. Engaged and neutralized. Threat using standard defensive protocols. No human casualties. Recommend increased patrol frequency for outer colonies. End report. Lieutenant Commander Choi read the report over his shoulder. Captain, don't you think you're understating things a bit? Kim shrugged. Hana, we did exactly what we were trained to do. We protected human civilians from a hostile force. The fact that they outnumbered us 800 to 1 is just a detail. A detail that's going to change how the entire galaxy views humanity. Kim considered this. Maybe. But at the end of the day, 12 million people on New Sol get to go home to their families tonight. That's what matters. On the Vectari homeworld, Emperor Zak Thul read Admiral Thexmore's report in stunned silence. According to his most trusted military commander, the humans possessed weapons that could ignore the laws of physics, defensive systems that made attacks simply cease to exist, and a philosophy of engineering that treated universal constants as polite suggestions. Send a message to the human government, he ordered his advisors. Express our desire for diplomatic relations and cancel all military operations in human space, all of them. Within weeks, similar messages began arriving from every major power in the galaxy. Trade agreements, non-aggression pacts, requests for cultural exchanges, scientific collaboration proposals. The Battle of New Sol had lasted less than 2 hours, but it changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Humanity went from being seen as a primitive, aggressive species to being recognized as something far more dangerous. A civilization that had looked at the fundamental forces of the universe and politely informed them that they were doing things wrong. And in the dark spaces between stars, more human ships continued their patrols. Ships with names like Unconquerable and Unstoppable. Ships crewed by humans who had decided that limitations were for other people. The galaxy was learning to be very polite to its newest neighbors, because when it came to humans, being rude could lead to some very unpleasant conversations about the nature of reality itself. On New Sol, life returned to normal. Children played in parks, farmers tended their crops. People went to work and came home to their families, safe under the protection of a species that had apparently convinced the universe to let them rewrite the rules. And somewhere in the vast emptiness of space, Captain Kim Min-ho and the crew of the Indomitable continued their patrol, ready to have another polite disagreement with physics if anyone else decided to threaten innocent people. The message was clear to everyone who had been watching. Humans were not just another species. They were something new, something unprecedented, something that made the universe itself sit up and take notice. And they were very, very good at protecting their own.